Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Delighted to have you. You're a scientist by background, by training. So what actually inspired you to focus on fertility and work on this particular product?
Yes, if you had asked me 10 years ago where I would be, it would not be in this world at all. Like, I never saw myself running a business or creating something from scratch. OOVA was really born out of a personal struggle that I went through. Like you mentioned, my background, it's in genetics and data science and biology. It's totally not on like business or even fertility per se. Where I became my fertility expert, and I'm putting that in air quotes because I think we all become experts in fertility after we go through our own journey, is I actually went through a very difficult time trying to conceive my son. And my husband and I had kind of anticipated the journey to be complicated because I've had irregular cycles my whole life. My husband and I were both a little older when we started trying to conceive. We were both already in our 30s. And I also have an autoimmune disease. I have celiac. So even though the cards were kind of stacked against us, we decided that we wanted to pursue parenthood naturally. And if we didn't conceive naturally, then we did not want to go down the route of ART, or assisted reproductive technology. For me, it was actually easier to make peace with possibly never being a mom than it was to go through a failed cycle or potential miscarriage. I just didn't think I could deal with the loss. So I give so much credit for women who are able to go through multiple cycles or even one cycle of IVF or IUI, or even Clomid for that matter. So what I started doing when we started our journey was I started peeing on sticks every morning. I took my body temperature 4:30 a.m. every day. I used every fertility tracking app. And luckily, I conceived my son after 18 months, but that time was the most devastating of my life. I've never felt so debilitated in my life. And the worst part was that after I'd collected all this data, I didn't really learn anything about my cycle. All I found out was that I had irregular ones, and I knew that going in. I also quickly realized that all of those tools were hardwired for that woman who had a perfect 20 to 32-day cycle, and that wasn't me. So that's really where the idea for OOVA was born, because I realized if I knew what my hormones were doing, I would know exactly where I was in my cycle, and I'd know what to do and when to do it. And that was the key piece of information that was missing from my entire journey.
What would your advice be around like how to even start thinking about tracking your cycle or getting to know it better?
So the first piece of advice that I would give is stop being your own worst enemy, because that period of not knowing what's going on it was one of my darkest periods ever, because I literally lay in bed thinking about all the things that I had done in my life that led to this moment of me not being able to conceive. And that's 100% not true. So don't curse yourself for being on birth control. Don't get mad about taking certain medications, not trying sooner, waiting to hit that promotion. You deserve all that, and you should not be hard on yourself for it. Everything in life happens for a reason, and we're all kind of going through the stages that were defined for us, predefined for us. We can't control that. What you can control is what information you kind of educate yourself with. Don't let yourself go down that rabbit hole of Dr. Google. Dr. Google does not have a doctorate degree, does not have a medical degree, and you can only trust what Dr. Google tells you with a grain of salt. Look at the tools that are at your disposal and figure out what is best for you. I'm not saying that OOVA is perfect for every single person, but it is one that you can have in your toolbox just to educate yourself on what is happening with your cycle. So if you have to go to a doctor, even if it's not an REI, but it's your OB or a wellness coach, anyone really, you can go to them with a report that shows what your hormone data looks like so they know what to do with that. And you'll be empowered with the ability to ask the right questions. So instead of saying like, my God, I can't get pregnant, my body's failing me, instead ask yourself, what can I do to get empowered to actually take control of this journey? Because I am going to figure out how to get pregnant. Your body's designed to do it. You just have to figure out how to get there and give it the right tools and information to really take ownership of it.
What are all of the ovulation monitoring options out there that you were kind of looking to reinvent?
Sure. There's let's lump them into several buckets because I think it's easier to talk about them in that way. So the first one, this is like the thing that everyone, when you wake up one morning saying, I want to get pregnant, now's the time. You're probably going to go to the drugstore and buy an ovulation kit. And those are the urine-based tests, right? So we'll keep OOVA out of the mix in that group because OOVA is a urine-based test. But The ones that you buy from your drugstore, they're all qualitative or threshold based. So like I said, they've all kind of been designed for women with that perfect cycle because there's a hard printed threshold for whatever hormones they're monitoring. And when your levels get above that threshold, you get a positive result. But if you're below that, you're always going to get the negative. So many of these ovulation kits that you can buy at the drugstore are measuring your luteinizing hormone and or estrogen. So they're really focusing on highlighting your peak fertile window. Now, the problem arises if you have irregular cycles or irregular hormone levels. Like for me, for example, I only saw a high result 4 times in the 18 months that I was trying to conceive, and I never got a peak. And it wasn't until I started using OOVA that I realized the reason was because my LH surge, which is the hormone that surges right before an egg is released, it just never hit that threshold. I just have a very low standard LH level. So I ovulate, but it's just not hitting the thresholds that these tests have been designed for. And a lot of women fall into that bucket, right? So those tests give a lot of false positives, a lot of false negatives. So it's something to be mindful of as you're kind of starting your journey. The second group of tests, or second category, I guess, are the body temperature sensors. So these are your basic thermometers. There's a lot that have now synced up with your phone through Bluetooth, like Wink and Natural Cycles, I believe also has a Bluetooth component to it. And what these tests are trying to do is detect a slight rise in body temperature that happens around ovulation, right? So now when we're talking about a slight rise, we're talking about 0.5 to 1 degree. And if you take your temperature every single day, and the idea is to take it at the same time before you get out of bed, so you're resting basal body temperature, you can imagine that your body temperature kind of fluctuates throughout the night for a variety of reasons that may have nothing to do with ovulation. You may have had alcohol the night before. You may have slept with your wrist or without a blanket one night. Your air conditioner might have broken. Like there's so many factors that tie into that temperature reading that you get, even if you measure it at the exact same time every day. So it was actually maddening for me because I was doing this as a step every single morning, but my body temperature was all over the place. And it's because of all these other factors. It really didn't tell me much about my ovulation. And after speaking with some clinicians, some of the things that they told me were like, if you take your body temperature for the past month, plot it on a chart, put it on the wall, stand 10 feet away, and then look at it, you may be able to retroactively tell where you ovulated. But in real time, it's quite difficult because there's just a lot of regular fluctuations that happen day to day. And then the third group of tests are those invasive tests. So if you were to go into the clinic for a blood draw, or now there's some at-home tests that you can use where you can provide a finger prick and send the sample in for monitoring. These are honestly probably a very accurate way to get the hormone levels that you care about. But the issue is that these hormones fluctuate daily, and what you want to see is what that behavior is over time. So it's not about getting a single snapshot because it depends on what cycle day you're getting that snapshot. If you happen to capture it on your LH surge day, you'll be able to say, okay, I'm ovulating, but you're not going to get the results for a few days or a few hours even, if you're lucky, if your clinic is doing it in-house. So it's not very good for real-time ovulation tracking or helping you get pregnant this specific cycle.
In a nutshell, could you just tell us what OOVA actually is and what it does?
Sure. So OOVA is an at-home test that monitors multiple hormones through urine and tracks that data over time. The 2 hormones that we're monitoring are luteinizing hormone and progesterone. And the whole idea is that the entire platform is completely personalized for you, right? So a lot of the tools that are available today kind of shoehorn women into this mold of a perfect cycle or perfect woman. She doesn't exist. She's not on this planet, right? We don't compare your data to some standard threshold. We capture what your baseline levels are, and then we detect fluctuations by comparing to that. And what our data is actually able to tell you is when your fertile window is, so which days are you most likely to conceive, and then also confirm if you've actually released an egg or not this cycle, so if you've successfully ovulated.
In terms of, you spoke about irregular cycles, how does OOVA solve for that?
Sure. So let's go back to the urine test that OOVA kind of falls into. If you buy an ovulation kit from your drugstore, When you open up the box, there's this foldable pamphlet you open up, and there's a table that says if your cycle length is X days long, start scanning on cycle day 7, 10, 15, what have you, right? But what if your cycle is irregular and you have different varying cycle lengths, like month to month? Which column are you going to evaluate? You don't know, right? So OOVA takes all that guesswork out. And what we do is when the woman actually registers in our app, because the product works alongside the smartphone app, she enters a lot of information about her reproductive health, her menstrual cycle, and her general wellness. We feed that data into our algorithm, and we tell her exactly which days of her cycle she needs to use an OOVA test. So we can capture her baseline levels, we can capture the LH surge, and then also post-surge, so we can confirm whether she actually ovulated or not.
So you don't actually need to use it every day, and yet you get that accurate picture across the week or the month.
So the kit comes with 15 disposable cartridges. We ask that you use it for 15 consecutive days once your scanning window opens up.
I just want to talk a little bit about ovarian reserve testing, because a lot of people, I think, get the testing of things like FSH and AMH, different hormones, confused with the benefits of testing LH and progesterone, those types of hormones. Could you just explain the difference between the types of testing?
Sure. So you're answering two very different questions with those hormones, right? So if you're looking at ovarian reserve testing, what you're trying to see is how many eggs do I have? What are the quality of those eggs? Because if you think about it, when a woman is born, she's born with all of her eggs. So you have a finite number of eggs that will help you conceive a child in the future if you so choose. Now, as you age, your body goes through a lot of changes. Even if you've had perfect health your entire life, there's a lot of stuff that can impact the quality of those eggs that you may not have realized. So getting your AMH and FSH tested is really getting an overview of what are the materials that I have to work with, and what quality are those, right? By looking at the LH and the progesterone, this is more dynamic. So you're looking at, on a daily basis, how are my hormones behaving so that I know when I can actually utilize those eggs that are going to get released and when they're going to get released. So you're asking very different questions by looking at all 4 of those hormones.
And so just to clarify, it's a urine test, but which hormones are you testing in the urine, and why is that?
Important, yeah. So it is a urine test, and each one of our test strips measures both luteinizing hormone and progesterone. So these 2 hormones are critical because the luteinizing hormone, when that starts, so imagine in the beginning of your cycle, both hormones are at their baseline levels, so very low, or very low for you. It could be elevated if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome and your LH is just a little bit elevated. That's fine. OOVA doesn't care. We capture whatever your personal baseline levels are. And then what happens is right before ovulation, your luteinizing hormone levels start to become elevated. And they reach this peak, let's just call it a peak. And when it hits that high level, an egg is released from the ovary. Once the egg is released and it starts traveling down to your uterus, the corpus luteum that forms begins to emit progesterone. And so what OOVA does then is it actually starts to monitor your progesterone levels to confirm that an egg was released. If an egg wasn't released, you won't see the progesterone rise. So that's really great information for women who are wondering, like, why am I not conceiving cycle after cycle? Is it because I'm missing my window, or is it because I'm not releasing an egg every cycle? We ask that you test at around the same time every day. That's not to the minute, but we ask within the hour. And the reason for that is because we want to eliminate as many variables as we can.
Taking and tracking measurements is one thing, and then interpreting them and doing something with it is quite another thing. And there has been a bit of hostility around at-home fertility testing from some OBGYNs and some fertility doctors. Do you work with them, or is it something where the app is also able to counsel, or is it a bit of a combo?
It's a combo. So you can use OOVA either alongside a clinician or on your own. At the end of your cycle, you get a report that can be shared with your clinician if you so choose, or you can interpret it yourself. It's all designed for you to be able to kind of take control of your own fertility journey. Now, if you're working with a clinician, which is, to your point, yes, there's been a lot of pushback from clinicians, but the reason for that is because the data that the clinician was receiving wasn't what they were used to seeing, right? So OOVA is actually providing the clinician with the quantitative hormone measurements that they're very used to seeing. And we're actually providing an additional layer, because now it's not just a snapshot of your hormone measurements. they're getting the time series 15-day measurements in real time. So the doctor can actually take the interventions without having to wait for lab tests, without having to make you go into the clinic. So the clinicians have actually adopted OOVA quite happily.
How then do those measures actually help somebody be more likely to conceive?
It's quite remarkable. I mean, the level of accuracy and sensitivity that we're able to achieve. I mean, we've had plenty of successful pregnancies with OOVA. And what's also been really great is that the data that we're capturing with OOVA has directly informed the clinician how to intervene if necessary. So like one really fantastic use case for us has been the progesterone ratings, because women are quite concerned about early miscarriages. And what the doctors are able to do is after they confirm that the ovulation happened, assuming that the person had intercourse at the right time, progesterone levels are staying up. If they start seeing a dip, they intervene right away by providing a progesterone supplement to boost that back up. And so we've seen successful pregnancies happen. And like, I can't say the term yet because we're still so new. We just haven't had the first live OOVA baby yet. She's coming. We know she's coming very soon, but we don't have a live baby yet. But the fact that the doctors are able to intervene with the progesterone and monitor it so closely has been like kind of a game changer for everybody involved. So we're able to shed a lot of light on what's going on with your fertility just by monitoring for 1, 2, even 3 cycles.
Okay, you know that you're about to ovulate, or you know you have ovulated. What is that great window for having sex to optimize the likelihood of conception?
Sure. So what our app does is when we start seeing a certain differential in your luteinizing hormone levels between your baseline and, like, let's say today's value, you'll start getting pinged to say, like, now's a great time to have intercourse. And we recommend you have intercourse every other day during your fertile window. So in the app, the fertile window will shift from wherever it had predicted. We shoehorn it back to what the data is actually telling us. And then we ask you to have intercourse every other day until you get that confirmation that the progesterone has rise and you've ovulated successfully.
So timing really is everything.
Unfortunately, and it's so sad that we're all taught that if you have intercourse, you're gonna get pregnant. That's just so not the case. If you think about it, in a year, you only have 12 chances to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And if you're like ideal, that's 60 days in a year that you're able to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And that, like, those odds are pretty slim. Yeah. So you have to, timing really is everything. And you want to have the best tools and the best information to maximize on that window.
A lot of people, most people have irregular cycles rather than that neat 28-day cycle that we were talking about. But it's not necessarily understood why that is. Is this something that you think that you could contribute to research on? Absolutely.
I mean, the fact that the data that we're capturing is so unique, it doesn't exist to date, getting this time series LH and progesterone levels. So we're learning a lot. We're figuring out like how your sleep, how your mood, how your anxiety levels all factor into how your hormones are directly behaving. Like, this is all data that we're able to kind of start mining and figure out what's going on. This is where I start to nerd out, because it's just like, it's so interesting how much is unknown about our menstrual cycles. And we actually can control a lot more than we're given credit to.
What are a couple of the really key areas that can influence either the timing of ovulation or whether or not it occurs?
I think, well, so first of all, you want to have, like, BMI plays a big role in this. So having a healthy diet, healthy exercise routine, like, that's a big factor. Sleep is also really big. So this is one thing that definitely drove me to have irregular cycles, because since I was in high school, I've needed maybe 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night, and I am functional. That's definitely not enough for your body to get enough rest. But sleep plays a huge role in ovulation and, like, making sure your hormones are balanced. There's a third one that is pretty critical, and I think that the past year has shed a lot of light on this, is stress levels. We really want to try to figure out ways to maintain your anxiety and general stress. And there's a lot of little habits that you can invoke to make your cycle and your body a little bit more rhythmic.
I'd love to hear some more stories, if you have any, anonymized, of course, of any people that have used this and have found that it's had an impact. You know, they were frustrated like you were about using kind of more traditional methods, and how this has changed things for them.
Sure. Yeah, I could share two really interesting stories because we were super excited about these two. The first one was of a woman who was of advanced maternal age. She was 45 and trying to conceive her third child. Her first two had been born through IUI, or intrauterine insemination. So she's never been able to conceive naturally. She was trying to conceive her third. The doctors are all saying that you have to go through an IUI. She was very nervous to do so because of her age and wanted to try naturally first. So she was working with one of OOVA's providers, one of our clinicians, and the clinician recommended that she use OOVA to figure out like what is going on with her cycle. And it took us 3 cycles, but in the first 2, the clinician actually started intervening based off of the results that OOVA was providing. So providing certain supplements, providing certain diet recommendations, giving certain exercises. So a lot of interventions that she was doing. And then we successfully got her pregnant in the 3rd cycle, naturally. She was about to begin her IUI the following week and then got the positive pregnancy test and was completely floored. So, and I think from when she got her pregnancy test, she actually turned 46 the following week. So it, like, the fact that we were able to get a woman, people who say like after 40 you can't get pregnant, it's a lie. Like, you absolutely can. Our bodies are amazing. So that was one that was really exciting. The second one was pretty interesting. Like I mentioned, when you register in the app, we ask a lot of information about your history, right? So when your last period was, how long your cycle is and whatnot. And that drives a lot of our initial recommendations for when you need to scan an OOVA test. So we had a woman register in the app and she said her period was over a year ago. And I reached out to her and I was like, is this true? Because otherwise everything's going to be a little off. And she said, yeah, it's true because I got pregnant, I delivered my baby, and I'm still breastfeeding. So my cycle hasn't come back yet. But I want to have my kids close in age, so I want to try to get pregnant. And I was like, all right, well, we don't really know what's going to happen cycle 1. So we're going to learn a lot. We might not be successful. And she's like, that's fine. Let's see what happens. So cycle 1, we didn't help her get pregnant. We learned a ton. Cycle 2, she actually got pregnant using OOVA. And this is the baby that we're expecting in a couple of months that will hopefully be our first OOVA baby. But the pregnancy is going well, the mother is doing really well, and the family is super excited.
With that, Amy, thank you so much for giving us amazing information today, leaving us all kind of more informed about ovulation monitoring and the technology options available now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.